Okay, for those of you not familiar with construction grammar assumes that the heart of grammar is form meaning pairings. These are arbitrary and conventional, and the classic ones are words. So something like apple is a Caesarean sign. It's got a form, either a string of sounds or letters, so apple in English, and it's got a meaning associated with it, apple in this case. And I'm only using a shorthand notation here. Obviously, from a cognitive perspective, we would assume that apple evokes a rich conceptual experiential frame. So you know what an apple tastes like, its shape. You can almost imagine having one in your hand, what the weight would be. So it's a rich encyclopedic knowledge that we've got stored here, but we just abbreviated for the sake of notation. We know that this is arbitrary. I mean, this is an old staple because different languages use different string of sounds for a similar concept. So in German, it's Apfel, in French, it's Pomme, and in Hungarian, Olmo, completely different strings of sounds, which are related, however, in a conventional way in a speech community to a specific meaning. And that means an individual speaker, in order to use it, must have stored this association of form and meaning, which we call a constructions, in their mind. What construction grammar now does is it extends the notion of a linguistic sign to all levels of linguistic analysis. So morphemes, something like untrue, unfriendly, and ungucci, can also be created by a schema that has a form level with un followed by some kind of adjective, and the meaning is not whatever the adjective, whatever property the adjective has. So untrue is not true, unfriendly is not friendly. This schema is going to be related to the adjective schemas in a bidirectional horizontal way, so that you can go one way or the other. If you invent a new adjective, gediddle, then you could have it a corresponding ungediddle. But at the same time, you can also go the other way, because this is not an input-output relationship. It's two schemas being related. So if someone says, oh, this was so ungucci, I immediately understand what they mean, even though before that utterance, I never used Gucci as an adjective. So then I know, oh, this is so ungucci, which means something can also be so Gucci. Okay. Now, we've already seen that morphemes can be captured as form meaning pairings, and words, obviously, but also idioms, as in John kicked the bucket and she spills the beans, are form meaning pairings. They slightly differ. In John kicks the bucket, the whole string kick the bucket is related to die, and then the subject slot specifies the person that passes away. In she spills the beans, on the other hand, the beans stand for information, and the subject slot is the person that tells the secret. And this explains, well, why this construction can also be used in the passive. So you can say the beans were spilt, because in this case, the beans has an independent meaning of information, of a thing that can be affected, like a patient, and that's why it fits the passive construction. In contrast to this, the bucket has no independent meaning in kick the bucket, so you cannot passivize this. So some people would argue that there are ways out of this, but maybe we can talk about this in the discussion session. But once you enter the field of idioms, and you can see that these are syntactic patterns of varying degrees of schematicity and complexity, then of course the next step is to say, well, couldn't we just describe everything? So not just words, morphemes, and idioms, but also other syntactic phenomena using constructions. And that's what Fillmore and Kay and others started in the 1980s, and Adele Goldberg sort of excellently illustrated in her 1995 book on argument structure constructions, that there is a field where you can clearly use this. So could he shriek himself unconscious? Firefighters cut the man free, have a resultative meaning. So he causes himself to become unconscious by shrieking, and firefighters cause the man to become free by cutting. And it didn't take you more than a second to understand what the sentence meant. But, you know, from a classical rule-based approach, you would say, well, shriek is an intransitive verb. Someone shrieks, it's just a verb of noise emission. How can that have a resultative meaning? And similarly, cut is normally a transitive verb. Someone cuts something, you cut an apple, and then the apple is affected. But in firefighters cut the man free, the man is hopefully not affected, he's not cut. But an object that's backgrounded, the car, is being cut, and he ends up being free. And so for these instances, again, you can use a full meaning pairing. You can have subject, verb, object, and oblique, and that has a corresponding meaning of A causes B to become C by V. So firefighters caused the man to become free by cutting. He shrieked himself to become unconscious by shrieking. Now that we've seen what constructions are, I just would like to go through the main concepts that are going to be relevant for the talk. Constructions are stored pairings of form and meaning in the mind of a speaker. They're entrenched, and that means they must be in the long-term memory. You must remember what the resultative construction is to use it in the future. Constructs, on the other hand, are specific utterances, what in the olden days was called parole or performance, an actual output that you can sort of then analyze. In many instances, one utterance is going to be a combination of constructions, as we will see. And these have to be assembled somewhere, and this is best explained by the working memory. That's the place where long-term memory information is activated and brought together. And as we will see, constructs play a huge role in creativity. Construction grammar then claims that all levels of description involve form meaning pairings, that there's a network of constructions that explains this, and this network is called the constructicon. It's analogically formed on the lexicon. Because of this, there is a lexicon syntax clan. There is no longer a strict difference between lexicon and syntax. Both involve form meaning pairings, and there is only a difference in schematicity. And finally, usage-based approaches put to the forefront the notion that individual performance is always going to leave an impact on your mind. So competence and performance are closely intertwined, they connect each other, and every time you want to utter something in performance, you've got to activate competence level knowledge, and then once you hear it, it can become part of your competence again. So constructions are acquired in a usage-based perspective via input, so specific usage events with rich contextual clues, and domain general cognitive mechanisms, so pattern finding, schematization, categorization, and so on.